Hey folks, and welcome to the latest installment of Sounds That Have Been Made, my perennial music blog, vlog, whatever it's called these days. Online entries of random detritus about music that I happen to really like, or in a few cases dislike. But today's going to be something that I really, really like, and something that's really, really unusual. My collection is in a bunch of formats. I've got vinyl, I've got CDs, I've got MP3s, Ogg Vorbis, FLAC, and in this case, a true weird cassette. A real cassette, which I haven't played in probably 15 years. And even by cassette standards, it's a rarity. It is a fan club release, meaning at the time when I got it, somewhere in the 90s, all of this band's early material was well out of print. And so a bunch of fans decided to collect their various tracks and put out an early tunes, early rarities, B-sides, and circulate them. I don't think more than a couple dozen were made. I actually would be weirdly curious if anyone who maybe sees this even knows of anyone else who has one, because it's really, truly beyond obscure. You can't even find it listed on Discogs, but it clearly exists. I remember having it shipped to me when I was still studying at UC Davis, so it's like, it got some plays, definitely. But then eventually, over the years, their stuff got reissued, and I have since acquired all of their actual long player releases on vinyl, including they did a release of early cuts called Early, which also had some remixes on it, which is a great album to have. But I wanted to kind of cover who they be, and kind of, depending on what your poison is, how to get into them. They did start as a post-punk band, like a real damned post-punk band. Their peers were, well, the bands that they kind of did live gigs with: Young Marble Giants, Gang of Four, et cetera, et cetera. Their sound could be described as pretty wiry, clean, but buzzy. They had, influence of a band like Gang of Four. You can hear the relation, or early a certain ratio. Maybe even kind of some of the early energy of a band like Killing Joke is in their sound. Vocally, very different, because Green's Guardside has this very angelic, I don't know if it's an alto or a soprano, like on the higher end of soprano. Like it's a very crisp, beautiful, clean vocal style, and really quirky lyrics. At that stage of their career, very political, very much of that day and age. And all of that stuff, if you're into that kind of sound, well worth seeking out. Somewhere between 83 and 85, they had a complete overturn in personnel and in approach, and all that was left was Green Guardside, and he got a whole bunch of other band members and session guys to start putting out some of the most insanely well-produced and arranged pop records of that decade. So much so that those records to this day still sound amazingly chrome-plated clean in their production. And not in a sterile way, just in an incredibly pristine, beautiful way. Like the kind of quality of production I would associate with a Beach Boys or a Steely Dan. They sound nothing like those records, but I mean the attention to detail and the complexity of the arrangements. You've got real instruments mixed with drum machines and synth pads everywhere, but especially if you've got a musical ear, you start tuning in and you're like, that is real bass doubling the synth bass. That is not a simple bass part. Or ample use of counterpoint, which is not something you would hear in pop much those days. It's something you hear on a Steve Reich record, not so much on a pop record. Well worth exploring. By the late 90s, they had started to experiment with hip-hop. They had one of the earliest, I think major label recordings of Mos Def, and they kind of kept working with really interesting musicians throughout that whole period. Marcus Miller, Fred Marr, Wendy Melvoin and Lisa Coleman from Prince's Revolution era band. Just kind of a wild. Michelle Indeggio did bass and vocals on a couple of tracks, and I will fully support anything she touches. They did some session writing and recording with other folks. I think most notably, they did some track with Kylie Minogue, which I can't remember the name of. They did backing vocals and arrangements for a song they wrote for Shaka Khan, "Love of a Lifetime." Great track. So they're a band with an interesting discography, and like I said, if you're interested in the whole bag, by all means, traversing their catalog doesn't take a long time. It's not very extensive. They recorded very infrequently, so over 4 decades, you've got about maybe 5, 6 full-length albums to go look through. If you're a completist, you can go look for B-sides from singles, but that's maybe getting a little too obsessive. There's not a whole lot to kind of cover. There's just the 2 big eras, really. There's early post-punk stuff, and then everything else. And everything else, there is change from record to record. There is different leans on each release. But after '85, they became very much a sophisticated pop band and have stuck with that. To my understanding, they are still around today. They haven't recorded a new album in probably a dozen years or so. And I have heard nothing that says that that's going to change, but they do periodically do live dates. So the footage that I've seen shows a band that can still really deliver, so that might still be worth seeking out if you happen to be in the UK, because I don't think they tour anywhere else. And, once again, if anyone does know anyone else that has one of these, I would just be kind of curious to know, because I may have the only one left in existence. So, anyway, hope you have a good one, folks. Enjoy the sounds.